Gentlelady from Utah, Ms. Love.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Secretary, for being here today. I just want to be very clear that the questions that you're getting today, I usually go into my district and ask them what questions they would like me to ask of the Secretary. So just know that these are coming from people who have genuine concerns. You're before Congress today, and forgive me also if you've answered some of these questions. I need to make sure I get some of these on record. So you're here before Congress today to report on the status of international financial system, including the U.S. involvement in the International Monetary Fund. In its recent World Economic Outlook, the IMF expressed concerns that the prospect of trade restrictions and counter-restrictions threaten to undermine confidence and derail global growth prematurely. Do you share those concerns?
I don't, and I would just comment, although I support the IMF, I also question some of their projections on the U.S. economy as well.
Okay. Back in May 20th, you were quoted as saying that tariffs were on hold, yet less than 7 weeks later, new tariffs on Chinese goods went into effect and were immediately met by retaliatory tariffs by China. Clearly, other people in the administration weren't as interested in keeping things on hold. In the meantime, I heard a lot of concern from many different people in Utah, industries in Utah, about the negative impacts that they're already seeing from the uncertainty and the new tensions in our trading relationships. Just yesterday, I actually had a small business owner from my office come to my office, Utah Metal Works, which recycles metal and sends about 40% of its business overseas. They're suffering from uncertainty, and they want to see an agreement be reached, and not just the president, beating up on trading partners. At the end of the day, they want to see some results that is not going to impact their consumers. So, do you know what the end goal is? Is there a master plan? We're trying to figure this out. We're answering questions of our constituents, and it's very difficult to try and figure out what the strategy is. We know what the end goal is, but do you know what the strategy is? Do you know if there's like a master plan?
Well, first let me say the tariffs were on hold. We were close to having an agreement. We couldn't reach an overall agreement, and that's why the president decided not to keep them on hold. As it relates to a master plan, it's pretty simple. We've told China, we've given them a long list of issues. I think the answer is we want to make sure that they open up their markets and that they treat our companies fairly so that we can increase exports. I think, they buy about 130 billion of our goods. We buy about 500 billion of their goods. There's a huge opportunity if our companies can compete fairly to increase exports significantly. So the master plan is for them to open up.
The Federal Reserve said last week, right before the new tariffs on China imports were imposed, that the possibility of a trade war has forced some companies to put on hold their investment plans. So we now find ourselves in a situation where the uncertainty over global trade policy is causing businesses to scale back or postpone their capital spending plans that were incentivized by what we did in Congress in terms of implementing the new tax law. And tariffs, on the other hand, we all know it's really a tax on the consumers, and it will hit American businesses and consumers. It seems like one hand is contradicting what the other hand is doing, and they're not working. What are you doing with the administration to ensure that our trade policies don't undermine that growth that we're seeing, that positive growth that we're seeing in our businesses and that we're experiencing?
Well, let me first say tariffs are sometimes paid by the consumer, and sometimes they're paid by the seller and absorbed by the seller. So I don't believe they're necessarily always a tax that's passed on. I'd also just say that the president is very focused on economic growth. This is something that he campaigned on. From the beginning, we've been focused on regulatory relief, taxes, and trade. And I can assure you that we're not going to do anything that's going to jeopardize the great growth of the economy, although I recognize there are certain areas and certain markets that have been targeted that we need to be careful and sensitive to.
You do recognize that uncertainty does hurt our economy, and it really makes it difficult for people to invest. So
I recognize
just
that.
the uncertainty is difficult. Anyway, I implore that you would work to end this thing soon. Thank you.
Time of the gentlelady has expired. The chair wishes